here at Knollwood. And thank you so much for joining us today. Excited about this very informative and important program in front of us. This is our last Faith in the City for this school year. We will resume again in September, October timeframe, and already planning some good sessions. And we always appreciate your strong support during the year and invite you to get in touch with us about program ideas. We try to be topical. We try to be on top of things that are going on, but we like to hear from you. That's what I think makes this a vital part of our community. Though this is our last session for the school year, there are some exciting opportunities going on this summer, and we'll have a brief announcement about that and information about that at the end of our program. As always, we invite you to enjoy refreshments in the lobby, invite you to sit in the front row seats, and be sure to leave us your email name and email address if you're not already on our email list, and that sheet is in the lobby there. At this time, I'd like to introduce to you a very special person, our new senior pastor here at Knollwood, Dr. Courtney Allen Crump, to say a word or two of welcome to you here.
Good afternoon. I'm Courtney, and so glad to be with you today and a new part of this good church. And there are so many wonderful things that are a part of the life of Knollwood, but one of them is this church's commitment to equity and inclusion and being intentional about how we engage the community around us. So I'm grateful to get to see you today and be a part of these conversations as somebody who's going to have a little one entering the school system soon. So thank you for being here and for your commitment to care about our schools and our kids and all that makes life in Winston-Salem good.
Let's move ahead with today's session. We're happy to welcome as our speaker, Dr. Heather Koons, Director of Research and Communications at Public Schools First, North Carolina. Dr. Koons has taught high school English, worked at the NC Department of Public Instruction and Accountability Services, and worked as an educational researcher in the private sector before joining Public Schools First. She has a PhD in educational measurement and evaluation from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She is a product of public schools and the proud mother of 2 public school graduates. She's deeply committed to fighting for fair and transparent use of tax dollars for public programs that benefit whole communities and make our state stronger. She has a lot of good information to share with us this afternoon, and then also we will have some question and answer opportunities at the end of our session. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Heather Koons to Faith in the City.
Sometimes get dry throat, so I need that just in case I might not need it. So thank you so much for having me here today. I am so thrilled to have the opportunity to talk with all of you about something I'm deeply, deeply passionate about. As you heard, I was a public school teacher in North Carolina. I have kids who went through the public school system. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit, but let me start off by saying, you may have seen on the table a couple. These are bumper stickers that you can put on. We have 2 Meriden public schools of our community. We love them. And integrated school benefit all children. They're free, so if you want to take one, take one. If you have a friend who wants one, take one also. Also on your way out, we're hoping that you will pick up a folder. We'll have those on the table by the door. This will have a lot of information that I don't talk about today and some information that's supplementary to what I talk about today. So I could go on forever and I'm not going to because I want to make sure that there's time for questions. But if you pick that up, you'll have some things to hand out. And we will have extras in the back if you're going to have a meeting or you just want to share with your neighbor. Please take as many as you want until they're all gone because we made like hundreds for the rally in Raleigh on Friday. And a lot of people took them, but we still have some extra. So please take as many as you want. So let me just dive in and start out by explaining who we are. This is Public Schools First, North Carolina. basically, we believe that public schools are a public good, and that belief drives everything that we do. So public dollars belong in the communities where they can serve the public and the public good. So that's it in a nutshell. And so what we do is we are a statewide organization and we are nonpartisan. So it doesn't matter a political leaning, none of that matters at all as long as the person and organizations are supportive of public schools and are doing things to advance public schools and using tax dollars, public dollars for public schools. So our goal is to share information, talk with people like you all, hope that you all go to our website and share the information that we put together. So we do a lot of data collecting, we do a lot of fact sheets, we do a lot of big reports. The reports are used, or our goal with reports is to use them as a starting off point for people who want to take a deeper dive. We get lots of college students who use our material for their research project or their capstone project, and then they call us and say, hey, can I volunteer or can I intern with you, that kind of thing. So those are resources, but we also have a lot of one-page fact sheets that are really easily consumable that we hope people just share. So hopefully we're hitting all audiences with this. That's our goal. We have a lot of social media, so you can follow us on Facebook. We have quite a presence on Facebook, actually. Facebook, Instagram, you name it, we have it. So you can follow us on your favorite. And through our social media, we put out actionable alerts. So for example, if there's a particular bill that we're really concerned about, or that we're hoping people will call lawmakers and say, please vote for this, or please don't vote for this. Or if Governor Stein vetoed a bill and there's a veto override coming up, we'll put out information on our social media and say, please call your lawmakers, urge them to uphold Governor Stein's veto, for example. So getting in touch with us through social media is a way to do that. And then we do webinars. I'm going to mention a few webinars on some of the topics I'm not going to dive into much today. They are on our website, so you can go there and watch them at your leisure. So those are the ways we share our information. We're a very small group. There are 4 of us, and none of us is full-time. So we're very small. So we really try to expand through getting information out and hoping that other folks will take our stuff and run with it. So I'm going to talk briefly about how things were then, early 2000s. Then I'm going to go to some rankings and where we are right now. Many of you have probably heard in the news a lot of where we are right now. It's not a pretty picture. Then I'm going to talk about the privatization effort that has been ongoing across the nation, honestly, and particularly in some states, and North Carolina is one really a state where people have really focused on the privatization and all of the things that are going along with that. But I want to tell a little bit of my story with how things were then, because my education story in North Carolina started in the late 1990s, in 1998, when I first came to North Carolina and started as a high school teacher. And I would go to conferences around the state with other educators, and it was awesome because other educators would say, you chit chat, right? I think a lot of you were former educators or principals and stuff. So you know what I'm talking about, what then was. So they would be like, I remember a teaching couple who had come from Virginia because they had heard and were living a life in North Carolina, wonderful things happening in North Carolina education. Teacher pay was going up. We were writing details, or we were benefiting from Governor Hunt and the lawmakers and their support for public education. And then I started working at Department of Public Education, and this was in the early 2000s. And I would go to national conferences. And there was one that was in Texas in the early 2000s that it was just a highlight for me because Ron Page, who was the Secretary of Education at that time, was one of the keynote speakers. And in his speech, he called out North Carolina nationally as being a real leader in public education. We have had the support of our wonderful governor. Our NAEP scores in reading and math were climbing steadily. And he just was like, look at North Carolina, they're doing great things in our nation, right? And in a smaller session, a woman from a state, it was Oregon, she stood up and she said, she was a curriculum person in mathematics, and she said, we have such North Carolina math MD. Because North Carolina is doing such great things in math. Your NAEP scores are going up. We just have North Carolina happen. I'm just like, this is where we used to be. And I know in my bones that we can turn this ship around and we can be there again. And have the Secretary of Education, hopefully we'll have one that's supportive of public education in our future, looking at North Carolina again and seeing what we've done to really move the needle for our educators and our students. So I want to go back to what I was living. But where we are, so back in the day, we were above the national average in terms of teacher pay ranking. So every year, the NEA, National Education Association, puts out a report of teacher pay rankings and estimates. So their ranking is from the prior year. So this 43, this ranking just came out. So the 43 is for 2024, 25, because they have full data from last year, right? But they're also their report also estimates for the current year. The year's not done. They'll have to, double check their data over the summer, whatever, but they estimate, and this is the number that is really in the news right now because it's probably going to stick. We've dropped to 46th in the nation in average teacher pay. So these averages, I'll show you the numbers. I'll just move over there. The numbers include state funding as well as local supplements. So being so low in the nation is horrible. Being so low in our neighboring states, we're the lowest by far, is a huge competitive disadvantage for our state. And we've been there for a while now, but when you think about attracting and retaining good educators, this low ranking is really detrimental. And I am hoping our lawmakers get the message and make a change. So you can see all of Virginia, Tennessee, South Carolina, they're kicking our butts. And then Georgia, they're all have better rankings. And I put the table in there. You're going to get these slides. I know it's hard to see here, but if you look last year, so 24, 25, the average, and this includes local supplements. So Wake County, they supplement a lot. Some districts can't afford to supplement a lot with local dollars. And actually, these are real dollars. The average pay has gone down in the estimate because, as you know, we have no new budget. And but there have been some declines in funding. So in real dollars, this is from a DPI report they put out that the actual dollar salary for teachers average went down 1% from last year to this year. And then when you factor in inflation, it's just an unsustainable, awful situation. So contact your lawmakers. That's our message always. Contact lawmakers for everybody around the state. And so the state is really in charge of salaries. That's their role legislatively. And districts get about 60% of their budget. About 60% of district budgets come from the state. It varies across. Some districts are going to get more in federal funds if they have more Title I schools, that kind of thing. And then the local, it's usually about 22 to 25%. But the state is responsible for salaries, and the local district is supposed to be capital expenses, maintaining, facilities and things like that. But because the state has kind of slacked off, a lot of local districts have to supplement. But the state salary schedule drives everything. It is the minimum salary. So what we have here is North Carolina salary schedule. So we did some research at Public Schools First, and we looked at all of the states in the southern region that published a state salary schedule, a minimum salary schedule. And so this past year, North Carolina minimum starting for beginning teachers was $41,000. So local districts like Winston and Wake supplemented with a few thousand, 6,000, 7,000 sometimes to bring those up to a livable, well, not even a livable, anyway, bring it up. Let's put it that way. But some districts, there are a few districts, counties that don't supplement it at all. So they go in right here. So we're below Mississippi in our starting salaries right now. And you may have heard that Governor Stein is really pushing to increase the starting salaries. That would be a good thing. And the House is on board with that. So let's hope that happens. But veteran teachers need a salary increase as well. And so we need to push for veteran educators to get much more than we're seeing in Governor Stein's budget. But, something is better, we just need to keep pushing on that. But what this does is it puts us at an extremely poor competitive position with our neighboring states. When you think about Charlotte Meck, where those teachers can just drive 10 minutes and get into South Carolina, where the minimum salary is much higher and average salaries are much higher. So if you've ever followed that North Carolina Budget and Tax Center, this is a source here, they do wonderful work on tax and the implications of North Carolina's tax policies. And one of the things they've looked at, as you can see, what we have here is the change in per pupil, per student funding since 2023. And it's down 13%. So this is inflation adjusted. So you sometimes hear lawmakers say, well, we're putting more money in, but when you factor in inflation, over time, it's actually less. So the real impact is, less and less support for our students on a per pupil basis. Now, teacher salaries, this libertarian organization called the Reason Foundation did a study of all the states, and they looked at the change in average teacher salaries from 2002 to 2022. And they found that, and this is one of the sheets in the folder that I hope you'll pick up on the way out. And one of the data points on this is that the North Carolina teacher pay, average teacher pay, has gone down 20.6% from 2002 to 2022. That's a big drop. So again, it's inflation adjusted. But North Carolina was the third lowest or the third greatest drop in the country. So only Michigan and Indiana dropped more. But they started with higher salaries. So even though they dropped a little bit more, their teachers are still making a lot more than North Carolina teachers. And so this is, this funding effort. This is another ranking, making the grade. The Education Law Center puts out rankings every December, and they rank our schools on 3 areas. I have 2 here. Cost adjusted funding level. So they adjust according to the cost of the area. And we are 50th. In this case, they have 51 in this particular ranking because they include DC. And only Idaho is less in terms of cost adjusted funding level. And in funding effort, we're 50th out of 50. And that's based on our GDP, our revenue, the income that we can bring in, and how much of that we put toward public education. So we are the lowest in the nation in our funding effort. And this is a state policy. This is our state lawmakers making these decisions. State lawmakers could make different decisions, and we could go up the ranking very quickly if they made different budgetary decisions. And one of the decisions they're also making is to drop our corporate income tax and individual income tax that primarily benefits wealthy individuals. The Budget Tax Center has a lot of information on this also. But we're scheduled to go down to 0%. Right now we're at 2% of corporate income tax. So the tax on the profit of all of these corporations. And that of the states that have a corporate income tax, this is the lowest. 2.0 is the lowest level. And we're going to go down to 0%. So that we're cutting our revenue, at the same time, we actually need to put more money into our education system. How many of you are familiar with the Leandro school funding case? Okay, great. So I won't talk too much about that. It was a lawsuit. So let me just say this third. So this Constitution guarantees every child a sound opportunity for a sound basic education. And we talk a lot at Public Schools First about fully funding our public schools. And people are like, well, what does that mean? What does it mean to fully fund our public schools? Well, as part of this lawsuit over the years, they put together, they being the plaintiff, anyway, I won't go into that, but there was a comprehensive remedial plan created, and it goes into great detail on where and how much money should go to fully fund our public schools. So when we talk about, we have a very, very specific, comprehensive roadmap of what we should be funding. So it's not a secret. It's right there. But in April of this year, the Supreme Court, our current Supreme Court, dismissed the case with prejudice, which means that there is no avenue for appeal for that particular case. And I have our website up here because we have webinars. We did a webinar recently with some legal experts. It's called Leandro. The Leandro update, what happened and what's next. And it really goes into the background and then possible avenues for schools and families moving forward. It's a terrific webinar. So just go to our website. We have a lot of Leandro. And then we're in the process right now of putting together some social media images. This is the one we have for Fort County. We haven't started posting them yet because we don't have all the counties done yet. But what this is it took the Leandro funding. Every Child NC is part of the NC Justice Center, put together, you work with Duke in 2022 to identify how much funding per the Leandro Comprehensive Remedial Plan every district is owed. And then we updated it for inflation. And so you see in Forsyth County, if lawmakers had committed to funding the Leandro plan back in the day, it was an 8-year plan. So funding each year. So this is for all 8 years. Forsyth County schools, or Winston-Salem, Forsyth County Public Schools, would have received $122 million. So just imagine what the budgetary landscape of the school board would look like if they had over these years, up until 2028, 122 million, which is what the plan had. But instead, and we'll be getting to this, the state has made the decision, this is lawmakers making these decisions, have put $70 million to date into Winston-Salem private school tuition vouchers. I should say this is the Opportunity Scholarship voucher. This is not the ESA voucher money. We don't have that included in this total, but you can see it's state policy. They're making these decisions. The money is there. It's just going elsewhere. That said, I want to emphasize that North Carolina Public Schools, despite all of that, what's happening and all of the blows in terms of funding and all the narrative that's out there with the pro-privatizers, North Carolina schools are pretty amazing. We have amazing teachers. We have by far the most national board certified teachers in the nation. Part of that is because they get a salary bump, so that's incentive if you get national board certification. But that is a very rigorous process. And so it's not like you just check a box and you get that. It is hard, and I really respect the teachers who have gone through that. And we have by far the number one. Number two isn't even close to us. So we have high quality educators. And this is a promotion by the Department of Public Instruction, the Champions Network. And Superintendent Green is promoting this. It's across the state. It's his strategic plan to make North Carolina public schools the best in the nation. So, get back to where we were on our way before by 2030. And so he highlights some of these historic moments. It just speaks to how solid a foundation we have, and we just need to support our schools. Highest four-year graduation rate last year in the state's history, the highest AP scores in the history, and above the national average scores. Not just the highest for North Carolina, but above the national average for the second year in a row. The highest career tech credentials to date in North Carolina history. So not just college prep, also the career prep. And the highest percent of graduates who are receiving college prep credit. So that's like through early career programs and things like that. So they're starting their college career with, the AP, yes, but also having taken the courses through early college. So this is so much to be proud of. If you want to get involved in this program, just Google it, and they have a website and lots of different ways the community can get involved. So sign up. So now I'm going to shift gears to the privatization and the damage that this privatizing, and then really the emphasis on school vouchers that we're seeing in our state right now. But before I jump into some of the data, I want to give you a brief history of vouchers in North Carolina. So what's happening right now is what I call phase 2. Phase 1 of vouchers in North Carolina started a year after the Brown versus Board of Education ruling to integrate our public schools. So the year after that, the legislature in North Carolina passed the Pearsall Plan, which provided for the state to pay families to send their children to a private school if they did not like the fact that the public school that their child was supposed to be going to was going to be integrated. So you might imagine a bunch of schools cropped up. They're called segregation academies. And that's phase one. And that was declared. An interesting thing about phase one is the legislation prohibited state funds from going to religious schools because at that time, the belief was that was a violation of the separation of church and state. So no religious schools at that time. And that was declared unconstitutional in the late 60s. Now we jump forward to 2013, legislation was passed. The new voucher program, the Opportunity Scholarship Program came into being in 2014, and it does allow money to go to religious schools. And in fact, the vast majority of the funds, almost 80% of the dollars through the Opportunity Scholarship Program goes to religious schools. But the school privatization playbook, and this is in your handout or in the folder, it goes through a lot of different aspects of privatization, not just the vouchers. So it's the rise of charter schools, particularly for-profit charter schools. So they're a completely different breed than the nonprofit, teacher-run, that kind of private, they're charter school. So actually North Carolina Virtual Academy is managed and run by a for-profit organization that is traded on the New York Stock Exchange. So they're 100% profit motive, right? This is a charter school, a virtual charter school in North Carolina. So there's that privatization. So this handout goes through that playbook. So the playbook across the nation, you can see it in North Carolina, lots of states, you underfund the public schools and you attack teachers. You say they're indoctrinating our students. We know this is nonsense. You promote narrative that public schools are failing. You discredit the schools. You say they're CRT. You talk about DEI, cultural wars, book bans. That gets into the narrative. The public starts to disengage. And then you push for private options. And this has happened in North Carolina. So we need to really push back with some of the things Superintendent Green is pointing out, and calling it what it is, which is a lot of nonsense and it's just a push toward privatization. So private school vouchers in North Carolina were first sold to the public in 2013 with this legislation as a way for students. So I'm talking about the opportunity scholarships right now, which pay for private school tuition at private schools, right? So the family applies to the state, and then if they get enrolled in the private school, then the state sends the money directly to the private school. So it's for private school tuition. There is another program, the ESA, Education Savings Account Vouchers, that is very much smaller and it's for students with disabilities. And it's much smaller in terms of funding, and you'll see a graph of that. So I'm not going to talk as much about that one today, just because the dollars are with this opportunity scholarship. And it's just so egregious. You can see I'm passionate about it. Okay, so as I was saying, these were sold to the public as a way for students to escape failing public schools, right? For low-income families. And at the beginning, there were income requirements. You could not make above a certain percentage of the income eligibility for free and reduced lunches. And it's expanded dramatically. So for example, when the voucher program was first instituted, you had to be a public school student in grades 2 through 12. Okay, you couldn't apply for a voucher for students 2 through 12 unless you had enrolled in public school. And then that got loosened a little bit to grades 3 through 12, prior public school enrollment. And as of last year, 24-25, there's no prior public school enrollment requirement at all. So that whole notion that this is something to help people move out of an undesirable public school, that's gone. You never had to have even thought about going to public school, but now you can get a voucher. And the income limit has also been demolished. So originally, this free and reduced lunch requirement of about 133% at that time, that was about $53,000. And then over the years, it went up. And it was expanded to up to 200% of the free and reduced lunch eligibility. And then last year for the school year 24-25, there's no limit. So people of any income level can now get the vouchers. So basically what this is changed from is for private school or public school families to move to a private school to a flat out, no questions asked subsidy for parents who want to send their child to private school. So it's a new budget line item that the state has taken on to the detriment of money that could be going to public schools. So as you might imagine, enrollment exploded. So this right here, this is enrollment in the ESA voucher program for students with disabilities. That's remained fairly steady. There are some requirements. You have to have an IEP, that kind of thing, and the funding is much lower. But as soon as everybody who had ever been enrolled in a private school, any income level, you can see that first year, it just exploded. But that first year, we found out because DPI was required to report on it, that only 13% or about 6,700 students who got these vouchers last year had ever been in a public school. So 87% of that voucher explosion, the new applicants, were already in private school. So this is just a shift of funds from the public to the private sector. It's just a subsidy for private school parents now. Or the private schools, actually the ones that are making out like bandits are the private schools. They're getting, I'll show you in a minute. So anyway, your income does determine the amount of the voucher. And so in that sense, there are some restrictions. However, so before universal eligibility, basically people in tiers 1 and 2 were eligible for these 2 tiers, right? Now with universal eligibility, you've got these high income people who are also eligible. They don't get as much, but imagine a millionaire who can fully afford private school getting, this year it's $3,400 from the state instead of that going to a public school. They're eligible for that.
And that's per child. The example I'm giving is Elon Musk puts in his 11 kids and get $3,500 per kid.
Yeah, that's per child. And in Wake County, which I'll talk about in a moment, there was an explosion of these very expensive, very, very elite private schools getting vouchers. And more than half of the new vouchers in last year in Wake County went to these 2 tiers. And the state has expanded the voucher funding as well. And one of the things about the state is that the voucher schools get forward funding. So the money for, let's just say the budget this year that they appropriate for the vouchers, it's for next year, not this coming year, but the next year. And so if there's a situation where we don't have a budget, it's okay for all those private schools and those families because the year before is where the state put the money into the program. So very few things are forward funded. That's a policy decision, and that's to bake in that money for those private schools. It's crazy. Public schools are not forward funded, but this voucher program is. So this is where I say we're in a new phase of of segregation academies. So the demographics of voucher recipients, you can see how much they've changed. When it started out, about 27% were Black or African American recipients, and white, and 51% were Black or African American. And that's completely reversed and expanded. So in the past couple of years, so this is an April update. So I've just updated a lot of stuff. So some of your handouts aren't fully updated to April, but it's just the last update. So for this presentation, I went in and I got it updated through the April. The NCSEAA puts all of their information up monthly. So yeah, so you can see. And ProPublica did a story on North Carolina segregation academies and about the voucher program a couple of years ago. And they went back to schools that had opened in the 60s and 70s as segregation academies, essentially. And those schools are still in operation, many of them in North Carolina, and many of them are getting millions of dollars each year. And they focused on ones that have massive race discrepancies between the students in the school and the surrounding communities. So this is basically segregation academy round 2. In some cases, not all, right? There's a great variety of private schools in the state, but some do are very segregationist. So, and you can see here, the percent of public school students is very different. So NCSAA breaks out race and ethnicity. So it's not here, but in your handout, you have a demographic sheet. And in 24-25, the Hispanic population was about 10% for the vouchers. And you can see here it's 22% in public schools. And then the white students, 42% compared to 73%, Black 25 compared to 11 with the vouchers. So very different demographics than in the public school. And one of the things we've seen, we did a lot of research, and we did a paper on this you can find on our website about the impact of vouchers on tuition increases. And what we found is that we looked at many years of data. And so this red shows the tuition change for the private schools between 2020 and 2021 school year and 21-22. So for these schools where we had 5 years of data, you know, that first year they increased 1.8%, then the next year 3.7%, and vouchers were kind of in the horizon, right? And then the year that vouchers expanded, almost 14%, right? So here we have 4 years of data. So the first one where we can compare tuition increase is 21-22 to 22-23. And then you can see from there on. In every case, this voucher expansion, the schools increase their tuition a lot to take advantage of the fact that all of their families could apply. This is, we have an interactive map on our website, which I'm showing you here. But what we have done is we've done a map of the total dollars spent on private school tuition vouchers for private schools in a particular county. So here you're seeing our county here, and that's 70 million again. So that's the total voucher spending from when the program started. You see up here, the school or the county with the most, $185 million have gone to private schools in Wake County through the voucher opportunity scholarship voucher program. Imagine what Wake County public schools could do with that, and Forsyth County with 70 million. You know, the dollar amounts are eye-popping. And so you can go online and just go to our voucher page or school voucher page, and you can just scroll around and see how much. But what's interesting is, I find it very interesting. There are some gray counties, and those counties have zero voucher accepting public schools. So basically money that the state could be allocating for their public schools is being sucked into those wealthy urban counties. They're getting, you know, not that it should go to their private schools, but it's just pulling money. You know, the money is not available for the public schools. And so we're putting together these social media images. Also, again, we're working on those, so we'll put them out showing this change in the voucher since before it was universal expansion, first year of universal expansion, second year, this year, private schools in Forsyth County have received more than $25 million. Private schools only in this county. I know your public schools could use that. Okay, so keep an eye on our social media. Also in your folder, I have these documents. It's really in the weeds, so I'm just going to tell you what it is and then move on. But it lists every private school by county. We're going to put these up on our website. But in your folder, I have Forsyth and I have Wake, because Wake County is astonishing. And they received the most. So it shows what they got, you know, each school, what they got before expansion, first year, second year, the change from before to after expansion, and then the total. And then at the bottom here again for Forsyth, it's 70,000. So please pick up your folder. You'll see every private school in the county that's received dollars, voucher dollars. And so one of the things that's frustrating is that there's zero accountability for where the dollar's going. So voucher supporters often say, well, there's accountability. If parent doesn't like the school, they can leave. That's private accountability. There is no public facing accountability for these schools. The public, you and I have no idea about anything that's going on there. So they don't have to participate in the letter grade. They don't have to employ a credentialed teacher. They don't have to do all of these things that are required of public schools. Oh, this is backwards. I just keep going and going and going. So all of these things are listed. Thank you. Is that what you need to point out? You guys, yeah. It's so funny how you get into the zone. Okay, so this is what traditional public schools have to do and private schools don't. How did that switch on me? Okay, so here, the conduct criminal background checks, we just need to switch these, right? So no transportation, all of that. But down here, this is particularly troubling. So the voucher schools, so do not have to do criminal background checks on employees except for one. The law requires that private schools do a criminal background check on the highest, with the highest decision-making authority. So one staff person required by law, that's all. None of the student-facing staff, no requirement whatsoever. People don't know this. So private school, we have done a lot of research. We did a report on the discrimination. A lot of the private schools have very discriminatory policies. They discriminate on ability, lifestyle, LGBTQ+ status, as well as religious affiliation. So a number of schools say if you don't belong to XYZ religion, don't apply, that kind of thing. So I just have a few examples here. I don't want to read through all of them, but it just gives an example of how these schools select specific students. If you don't follow their criteria, then they will not admit you, and they say it in their admissions policies. So in this one, this school, Calvary Day in Winston-Salem, very selective. Well, this year they're getting $3.6 million, and since the voucher program started, they've received almost $9 million in state funds. And they don't accept all students, not by a long stretch. Wesleyan Christian Academy, I want to point out this part right here especially, that this is lifestyle discrimination, that we call it the atmosphere or conduct within a particular home or the activities of the student are counter to or are in opposition to the biblical lifestyle, they can be excluded from the school. That's the home. So, and they've received, more than $11 million so far. This one, North Raleigh Christian Academy, their money exploded once they became university eligible. And they say students with IQs of 90 or less are not accepted. And then it goes on to say traditional IEPs are not accepted or available at North Raleigh Christian Academy. So those students, they're going to be served in the public school, and public schools are not, or they get the ESA voucher, but they're not going to North Raleigh Christian, and they're getting almost $13 million so far from the state. This one is one of my favorites.
Do they have boards of directors?
I don't know. It's not public knowledge. Maybe they probably do, but it's not public information. Yeah. So Thales is have any of you heard of Thales Academies? They're really big, yeah, in the Triangle area. So they have a bunch of campuses, and they say flat out, this was on their website last year, it's since been taken down. Can you believe this? They do not offer special education service, no IEP or 504, right? They have received 21 million, 48 so far, 21 million, almost 22 this year alone. It's so blatant. And when we talk about voucher increases, we tracked the Thales. They increased their tuition dramatically, and they have a campus in Virginia. It was flat. During the same years, North Carolina increased a lot. So this shows that they were playing the system and increasing tuition. All right, I'm going to keep going. Almost to the end. I encourage you to look on our website. We have a number of other reports. This one goes into the vouchers in a lot of detail. I'm going to go through and talk about our advocacy resources and then jump to questions. So you can, we have a newsletter, we have lots of fact sheets. The folders have a lot more detail. I encourage you to share our content. Write op-eds, get stuff out into the ether. You know, that is really supportive. It helps fight this negative narrative about public schools. Let your friends know, reach out, just activate, right? For teacher appreciation this week, we put up a postcard series on our website. So you can go to our website and download postcards, double-sided, and have your friends, family, neighbors, PTA, all of the, whoever you want, mail them to your lawmakers, mail them to your elected officials. We have two backs. One is blank, and then another one has a written message. So you can just look on our website and see if you're interested in those. We're going to be adding to this series because we really want to put pressure on lawmakers. So if you have any suggestions for fronts or backs, let us know. We have a webinar coming up actually next week about the legislative session. We do frequent webinars. After webinars, we always put them on our website so you can look and see. Follow us on social media, and we have a lot. If you go on our website, you'll see all of our social media. All right, questions? Yes.
First off, thank you. I feel very armed with a lot of facts and.
Yeah, and then don't forget to pick this up because it's a lot more.
So let me preface this by saying I'm an advocate for public schools and I'd like to be armed to go out and advocate further. What you presented, the one thing I really want to see that I didn't see is how the declining funding on both for student basis and teacher salaries has impacted student outcomes. But you actually presented it to us is as those two things went down, student outcome is at record levels, which, you know, if I wanted to play devil's advocate, I should say we should pay people even less and, you know, we'll rise. Do those facts exist in the folder and they simply weren't in your presentation, or can you speak to that?
Well, so that's a good question. So the question is, how do have student outcomes been affected by the decline in support for public education?
Exactly.
So we can look at North Carolina end of grade and end of course scores, and those have held steady. And actually, since they declined. So it's a mixed bag. And I would speak to the benefits of solid educators and that our outcomes are as good as they are. And we can look at national NAEP scores, and they were, like I said at the beginning, they were rising strongly up until about 2013. If you look across the NAEP and reading in math grade 4 and grade 8, they go up until about 2013, 2014, 2013 or 15, it's every other year. And then they start going down, and it's really dramatic in reading after about 2013. So the NAEP scores go down, and then in math, they pop back up this past year. So I feel like in some ways, our educators and our students are punching above their weight. So despite poor investment, we have had solid, high quality, national board certified educators, and we are benefiting from this tailwind of people entering the education system during the time where we were more supported and, you know, mentoring teachers and things like that. But we have had record teacher attrition rates. You know, it takes a few years for things to have an effect, right? You know, we've had a steady decline. Teacher attrition rate was at a record high last year. The record was 2 years ago at about, I think it was 11%. And then last year it was about 10%. So our pipeline schools are really, really struggling. And we are going to see that in the NAEP scores probably. But despite this, I think our educators and our students deserve a lot of credit for not being at the bottom of the barrel. We're at the national average for the most part in NAEP. And that's remarkable to me. And to me, it means we really need to support these educators more because they're, you know, they're doing a lot with very little state support. But that's a great point, and we should probably have a fact sheet on that.
I'm also a supporter of the public schools, but it seems to me that we don't do enough marketing and selling of the public schools. You know, we hear about all the problems here, but we don't hear about the good things. Now, part of the problem is if you put in the budget that you want to do $500,000 of advertising, at the board meetings, some people will take that on, but we need to do more of that, and that's something that we as parents, taxpayers, need to really push that. That we're doing it, that bills are pretty darn good. And they could be better, they should be better.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. And Superintendent Green and his staff agree with you as well. And he has this strategic plan for making the schools the best in the nation by 2030. And one of the pillars is to honor and promote the success of our public schools. So I would really encourage you to go onto the website and see what's happening in terms of that pillar and just getting the message out there. But they are really working to get the message out to the community about what our schools are doing, how well they're serving our students in so many ways, and what we need to do and what we can do to improve that. Yeah. You had a question right here, right? Yeah.
Pretty much everything you talked about, you emphasize the word policy decision, that is a choice. I'd like to know where your hope is, given the fact that this legislature is doing it intentionally. It's not like they don't understand the statistics are going, it's a purposeful decision to do this. Particularly crazy in light of the whole world of business and how our state is perceived economically.
Right.
I don't understand where that can change, except for our total upheaval, which could come of our state legislature. It's not unintentional. So where would they go, aha, I realize we shouldn't be giving this. They're not gonna do that. They're trying to get the money. They're trying to keep the public schools that way. So where's your hope in any of what we would do make a difference?
So where is the hope for change at the policy level, given that our current state lawmakers seem to be pretty entrenched in not supporting our public schools at this point? So I feel like there is hope, and I'll give you a couple of reasons why. So the state house, representatives are a little bit closer to their constituents because they have a smaller area, right? And they have to be reelected every 2 years. And they're seeing what's going on. And last year, the House budget had some robust teacher salary increases on there. So they're getting that. They have the message and they passed that. The Senate, however, blocked it, and we didn't have a budget because they wanted to increase the tax. So, but you pinpointed the key, which is having lawmakers who will make different decisions. And I'm hopeful that the current lawmakers are getting the message. I'm not sure what's going to happen this budget cycle, but in the fall, new ones will be elected. And I'll give you a reason, an interesting one. Senator Berger has been very pro-choice, anti-public school. That's terrible what he's done for public schools. And he was recently defeated, as you all know. Sam Page, who is very strong conservative, he was at the May 1 rally. And he said, our public schools need more support. So that's a change, right? So that gives me hope. And I believe there are a lot of people across the aisle that are just kind of waiting for a moment. And that moment hopefully is right now. But that's a very clear example where the voters, thank you, Rockingham County, they have someone in there now who is much more supportive of public schools than the current person.
Why has the constitutional mandate for the legislature to support public education not provided any remedy to this? It seems unconstitutional.
The question is, why has this constitutional mandate to provide for sound basic education, free uniform schools? I don't know. I think the lawmakers just choose to not follow the constitutional mandate. There are other forces at play there, this privatization push, and that is not their priority. That's a really good question for the lawmakers who are not supporting, they're pushing the money elsewhere. Because there's nothing in the Constitution about supporting private schools, nothing.
What is the basis for destroying the public schools? I mean, who's really behind racism?
Private schools make money. So the question is, what's the impetus behind privatizing public schools? And that is a whole other talk. And a couple of people mentioned racism, you know, there's a lot of, so at the same time that we had the segregation academy starting in the South, up north, you had Milton Friedman with the free markets, right? Saying, just give people money and let them do what they want because the free market will decide. So you have these different, you know, different reasons for this school choice, which is essentially the privatization. But I.
Why would Phil Berger, a guy who's in a rural county that's what, class 2 or 1, right?
Yeah.
Why would he try to destroy public schools? He got caught, you see, but it took 16 years to catch him.
Well, I think a lot of this comes down to money and other social forces that drive it in some cases, but not all cases. So in like Texas is a good example. National money went into Texas and the voters, you know, so let me just put it let's share something else. When in some states you can have a ballot initiative. And there have been ballot initiatives around the state, and in 2024, there are 3 states that had vouchers on the ballot. One, a constitutional amendment, others, you know, saying, do you support putting public money into private? They lost overwhelmingly. That was Nebraska, Kentucky, and Colorado. So anytime vouchers have been on a ballot, vouchers have lost. So what's going against that is huge money. Huge money. There's lots of billionaires wanting this. And so there's a lot of reasons
So the
why
money
they
is coming to the representative. And
Yes, yeah. And actually in Ohio, it was the Catholic schools. They were losing enrollment and then they lobbied and, you know, with the right people, and they got their voucher program in Ohio to help out enrollment in Catholic schools. So that was the genesis there. So it really, and that wasn't the genesis in North Carolina. So it has, but like Texas has been a big example where just money came in. You know, there's a guy from Pennsylvania who put $6 billion into the vouchers there. So yeah, multiple reasons. Lobby. So we need to get the voters out there and yeah. Okay, 1 or 2 more questions. Yes.
Help me with the math here. If I saw correctly, it's what, $70 million in Forsyth County that's been taken out of public school funding because of vouchers. But otherwise we would have received $122 million. Is that the other?
Yeah.
I'm trying to do the math and figure out if we got rid of vouchers and the money comes back, there's still another $45–50 million difference there. Did we lose that through the corporate taxes? I mean, the money has to come from someplace. Where do we?
Yeah, so think about this is the data that you're talking about. So the question was, help me with the math. If we would have gotten this, but the private schools got this, where did the other money go? So it's not really an apples to apples, it's more of a policy choice decision. So this money would have been, according to the Leandro Comprehensive Remedial Plan, the way they had it laid out by county, this money would have gone to Forsyth County if the state had chosen to follow the Leandro Comprehensive Remedial Plan. Now, they would have taken that money from other areas in the general fund, perhaps, and put it into the K-12 fund. So I don't know where that money would have come from. Maybe they would have chosen not to lower the corporate income tax rate, so we would have more revenue, those kinds of things. That's beyond my knowledge, you know, or expertise for sure. But what they did do, starting in 2014-15, which is when the voucher, this is opportunity scholarship money. When that program was launched, they have put $70 million into private school tuition. Now, this comes out of the general fund. It actually comes through the financial aid. It's not out of K-12 funding. It comes out of the budget pie. It doesn't come out of the public school slice. But we think if this is a slice that could be put back into the K-12 funding. So they have chosen instead to spend this money on private school tuition. And I don't know where they're getting, you know, that money again. It's coming out of other areas. This could have raised teacher salaries a lot across the state. $1.6 billion, teachers could be doing much better and we would be more competitive. One more question?
over how many years?
Pardon me?
That 70 million is over how many years?
10 plus until April of this year. So the first year of this is 2014-15.
But that's
And that-
just for Forsyth County.
This is just Forsyth County.
It's gonna be billions, right?
Pardon me?
It's gonna be billions of dollars going to private vouchers in the next few years.
Yes, it's gonna be billions if they don't make a change. But they can change that law right now. They just go in and change the law. I mean, we can turn this ship around like tomorrow if our lawmakers wanted to. Yeah. Yeah,
Key
one more,
point.
last question.
The key point about this is it's different parts of the pie. The 70 million does not take it away from the public schools directly. The other part is when that pie for the vouchers is not even all used. They have allocated so much money from our state budget to go to the vouchers. You know, we can't get enough for the public, but there's so much money to the state vouchers that if you have a kid in private school, and I have grandkids in a private school, don't shoot me. You get all these emails that say, we have money left. You haven't applied for the vouchers. So it's a huge pot that they've set aside. So hopefully Stein's budget proposal will change some of that.
So that's a good point about 2 points. One, we have a budget pot. They're choosing to take a slice and put it toward vouchers and make a smaller slice for public education. So I think it's coming directly out of what should be going to public schools. So it's this slice versus this slice. I don't think that's it's all could be going to public schools, right? But you make a good point that I did say, every year almost, that there's been money left over. And so what the lawmakers did 2 years ago, well, actually this was 2021, is they said, if there's money left over, you can spend up to $500,000, $500,000 a year to market vouchers and help parents apply. 2 years later, in the 2023 budget, they said, oh, we're gonna up that to $1 million a year to market and help parents apply. So that's where they're getting all the money to send out all these emails.
Who's marketing?
Pardon me?
Who is doing that work?
So the money was to go to a nonprofit, and there's this organization called the Parents for School Choice or something like that. They got that initial $500,000. I don't know who's getting the money now, but it was to go. Yeah, so I think we need to stop, but I will hang around if you want to. I'll hang around.
Thank you again. Very important information. Before we conclude, and there is a lot of information for you to pick up, there's something exciting going on this summer related to the Bookmarks Book with a Purpose that is also related to Dr. Bettina Love's opportunity with us previously. So Demarius Johnson from Bookmarks, say a word or two about that.
Yes, hello and good afternoon. Here, Managed Book with Purpose, Bookmarks Summer Reading Initiative. This summer, we have selected Dr. Bettina Love's Punished for Dreaming, How School Reform Harms Black Children and How We Heal. So part of this conversation that we talked about with legacies of discrimination, Dr. Love engages with that. The book is also an opportunity to reflect our own educational experiences, people that have been through all different kinds of schools, and also a third of the book, the latter half of the book, thinking about reform, what we can do about all that we've learned, this history and its legacies. And so we invite you to pick up the book. The books will be available at Bookmarks Bookstore on June 1st, Monday, June 1st. And we will have programming throughout the summer in July and August. And Dr. Love will join us once again in Winston-Salem in September for our festival, the last weekend in September. So thank you. We look forward to seeing you this summer.
Yeah.